Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are in the world. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends, and we are here today talking about the topic of taking risks and why it's so important to take a risk. Having said that, I have a wonderful panel today. I have the wonderful Kurt Kruger, who we were just talking about peace and the importance of peace and why forgiving ourselves, giving the giving ourselves, oh, there's a storm in Islamabad. That's why Kamran isn't here. He will be here as soon as possible. And it looks like he's here now. Okay, we were talking about forgiveness and the need to forgive in order to live life peacefully before the show. I have Cameron Rizvi, who is in the middle of a horrible storm in Pakistan, Islamabad right now. So he was a little late, but he got here. I have Pastor Billy, who you all know. He's been here many, many times before. And of course, the lovely Jeannie Alford Locke. Or is it Jeannie Locke Alford? Anyway, we have her, and she is helping me get through the shows in place. Well, no one can replace Allison, or anyone can replace anyone. But she is here helping me out and co-hosting for the month of August. And I am so thrilled to have you guys here. Having said that, Jeannie, you know what your job is.
Yes, I do. We've been having a pretty good conversation here in the last couple of weeks. Last week, we were addressing vulnerability and how important it was for us to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And then the automatic next step was to talk about taking risk and how to have the courage to take risk, how to make it a good risk so that you can grow in your own power and you can move yourself forward. And if this is going to be like we did on Tuesday, it's going to get deep, it's going to be interesting, and hopefully people will learn one or two things that will help them make a difference in their day starting today. Just one or two ideas that may be something you've known for a long time and may have simply forgotten because of the craziness and the chaotic nature that we've been going through these days. But just the idea of being able to put one foot in front of the other to identify a risk, accept it, and move forward. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Carla.
Well, when I talk about taking risks, it's important because when you get out of your comfort zone, everything that you know works and it's so easy to continue, you begin to grow as a person. And as you begin to grow, you blossom into your unique self. This doesn't happen until you begin to take the risk to do what you really want to do in life. I took a risk when I started the English show. I had no idea what would happen with it. And now, 4 years later, I'm still doing it with increasing new people coming and enjoying the show. And yet every day that I go to do that show or I go to do MindPlore, I get scared for a moment because I don't know if anyone's really going to show up. But that's getting out of my comfort zone. And of course, there is always someone who shows up, enjoys the show, and lets me know that. So that's taking a risk. It takes a risk when you need to say no to someone just because it's not in alignment with your thinking. But sometimes you need to do it. Simple things, moving from one place to another. And having said that, why don't we hear what Kurt has to say when it comes to taking risks?
You brought forth a thought that I hadn't thought of in a long time about risk taking. In 1964, I started at Los Angeles Valley College. I was sort of recruited there because I was a good swimmer. And the coach of the swim team suggested that I try doing water polo. I had never, ever, I don't think, seen that game, much less played the game. But it was water, and I love water and so on. So I gave it a go. That year, I had become the most outstanding player on the team. I was voted all conference. The next year, same thing, but I also got to be a captain. And it was all because I gave it a go. I experimented with life. And that's how my life has been, because my childhood motto is real simple: attempt and achieve. If I don't achieve it, at least I gave it a go. So from climbing mountains to zip lining to whatever it might be, I get to experiment with it, because in a way that brings more juice to life. It opens life more, because we get to see more, like traveling to different countries. People said, well, India is horrible. I knew one man that lasted 3 hours in India because he saw people begging. He'd never seen people with one arm begging, and the poverty that just outside the airport showed him. He was shocked. For me, I was thriving in India. When I got off into the ashram and outside of Mumbai, and I was in heaven. Poor, poor people around. I had never been around such poor people, but I also saw them being more happy than people in Los Angeles. The kids playing with just about nothing. So this exploration of life, if we want to stay in our cocoon, we stay within darkness. But once we break through our barriers, which might be just psychological, which might be, physical too, because some people have physical challenges. And we can overcome those physical challenges, especially the mental challenges. And that's what I've been doing the whole life, is experimenting with how to be able to be all we can be, so we don't have to join an army, and we can create peace. And this is what I'm all about now, is creating peace. So thank you for the opportunity of sharing that little tidbit, because I know that Cameron has probably, well, actually, we should, Cameron, I guess, probably is next. Huh? You've been taking notes diligently like a scholar or something. And I don't hear you. Unmute.
I'm unmuted now.
Yeah, I will defer to Carla and Jean. I will go only when I am invited.
Now you have done it. It is for you to speak. And Cameron, you're always taking risks. You're on camera constantly. Does that ever scare you when you go on camera to talk about anything?
Well, I'd like to talk about risk taking for a bit and then come back to the camera scenario. There is a distinction that often people don't make, which is there is gambling and there is risk. And I feel that distinction has to be made, because we don't want to gamble with life. It's not a roll of a dice that determines what we do with ourselves. Life is about calculations and also probabilities. No outcome is guaranteed. The future is not necessarily going to be what you want it to be. Destiny has its own plans. And I feel that risk is about being intelligent, wise, and at the same time, not letting knowledge turn you into a coward. Instead, to be able to confront your fears that you may be having in attempting anything, whether it's climbing mountains or zip lining, as my friend uh, Kurt just mentioned. And I think it's necessary. And so gambling is definitely not implied in risk. That is one thing I just wanted to be very clear about. The second, the distinction that I drew for gambling and risk was that if I blindfold myself and I cross the highway as a pedestrian, that's gambling. But if I'm crossing the road, looking left and right and waiting for the signal for me to cross, that crossing the road is taking a risk. And I feel that that is the kind of risk we need to take, because safety, we can't be reckless, but we need to be daring. So that distinction once made, then I want to also suggest that we are mindful and mindless of risks that we are taking anyway. The biggest risk that we have all taken, every person on this planet has taken, is to be alive. To be alive is the biggest risk, because we can die at any moment. And between life and death is one breath. So that risk we are mindless of, we are unaware of. And I find that when we are young, we tend to veer towards recklessness because we are naive, we're not aware of the dangers sometimes. And that's why you see kids doing some crazy antics on skateboards without helmets, without the due precaution, and end up in horrendous accidents with head injuries and whatever else. So zero risk, zero reward. So the life has to go on only when we take risks, and we have to acknowledge that there are degrees. Every person is born different. In one organization, if everyone was a high risk taker, you would take the organization into oblivion. You need to have some checks and balances in the process. And that is why collective and togetherness and team and family and community come in very handy, because we have a diversity of tendencies in us. So some are more risk averse, others are more prone to taking risks. And I have a feeling that a mix of such individuals creates not only a bit of debate, but I suppose more innovation and more creativity. And the biggest risk is, as you said, Carla, of hurting someone's feelings. Because if you disagree with someone, it may be taken as, oh, she's not on the same boat as I am, or she's jumping off ship and it doesn't want to be part of what we're doing. Conflict is a very necessary part of any enterprise, whether it's in a family or in a community or organization. Because when honest people exchange perspectives, there will be different viewpoints coming across. And if I'm afraid of speaking up, that is not going to bode well for the decision that is ultimately taken and the direction we embark upon. And I have a feeling that we need to have that scale and allow for some people to be risk averse, not entirely, of course, but at the same time, some to be daring. And that good, healthy mix is what creates a beautiful world. And even working for peace is a highly risky endeavor, Kurt. And I feel that you have very gently entered the realm of human existence, which is at this moment in time needing healing. A lot of healing is required. And I must say that I salute people like you who are wanting to see connection, human connection at a much greater level, more meaningful, more significant. So these were just some of my thoughts at this point on risk and risk taking.
So we are in agreement that risks are important and we need to take them. And the more we take them, the more we grow. Pastor Bill, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. Love being on with Jeannie and Carla, Kurt, and Kamran. Kamran, it's been a while. Good to see you. And taking risks is risky, if I could say that. So, and most people don't want to take risks. Why? Because they live in fear. We had a great conversation on Tuesday of this week about taking risks. And one of the items, was as a pastor, I'm always encouraging people to take risks, not just on, and people get this inflated idea, wow, are you asking me to take on the world? And I know for me, 50 years ago, when I was thinking about taking risk, it was like baby steps, baby steps. If you remember that great film, What About Bob? And I'm sure many of us have seen it. Maybe many of your viewers have seen it. But the solution to Bob's problem was taking baby steps. So oftentimes when we think about taking risks, we're thinking, as I mentioned on Tuesday, are you asking me to do what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did? Are you asking me to do what Mahatma Gandhi did? And of course, we know how their lives ended. But what I recommend for the people that are watching today, it's start small, baby steps, baby steps. Think about the micro taking of risk. And taking risk has great benefit because, and here's the key for me, when I take risks, it changes me and it changes the people around me in my sphere, in my network, because all of us here on StreamYard today, we all network, and my responsibility that I have is to be a peacemaker and be a peacekeeper, not only around the world. As I mentioned on Tuesday, I leave for Afghanistan in 10 days to be a peacemaker and a peacekeeper, but also within my micro network. And the word risk is from a old French word. I love to find out the meaning of words. The word risk is actually taken from the French word risqué, which means to run into danger. Uh, so when we take a risk of it's really a sign of giving of ourselves. uh, I do an exercise with people that taking, and Carla, you talked about forgiveness, and I'll conclude with this. But forgiveness is really opening up our hands to give, right? When we are forgiving, we are giving. We're giving of ourselves. We're letting go. And the exercise that I do with people is I say, clasp your hands and squeeze your hands as tight as you can. And I'm going to count to 10. Just squeeze. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Squeeze harder. 8, 9, 10. Release. Did that feel good or what? It really felt good. So, when you're not taking risk, oftentimes we don't take risks because of bitterness, because of anger, because of our past history or even our present history. But when we take risks, it's really that release. It's that release. And those of you who did it online, I mean, think about how good that felt when we were able to open up our hands and to give to other people. So taking risk is giving to others, and it's also giving to ourselves. It gets us to the next step. Back to you, Carla.
I actually have a question for you about that. Many times, if you're talking about forgiveness, and forgiveness is taking a risk, we have people in our lives who may say, may just get angry. And although we have forgiven and decided it's over, it's painful. How does one deal with that? What is the risk that we take to move forward and just say, okay, I am done. I have done my part?
Well, simple response to that is we are not responsible for others people response. Okay. We have to do the movement. But if I go to somebody and I say, look, would you forgive me for XYZ, whatever it is, and I do this as a regular basis as a pastor, I'm always living in the state of asking forgiveness, or, to use a Christian term, we call it repentance. And but my responsibility is to go, G-O. It's very interesting. The first two letters in the English word God are G-O, go. And so our responsibility is to go, but if the person does not want to receive the risk of our asking forgiveness, that's up to them. We can love them and guide them and point them in the right direction, but they have to have an epiphany about receiving our forgiveness. But their response is not up to me. My responsibility is to take the risk to go. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I'm wondering what Jeannie would say to that.
Well, I agree with Pastor Billy. There's only one thing, literally, there's only one thing that we really have control over, and that's how we respond to something. If I were in that situation, I would probably respond emotionally and try and beg that person's for forgiveness. But what I've found in practicing forgiveness, it's more about forgiving myself and allowing myself to move forward, and allowing that person to do the same thing. I can't control what the other person does in a response. I can only control myself. And that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up about risk, because risk taking is a mind game. We think others are in control, but in reality, it's us. And what we can control are the stories in our head, the stories that might put up obstacles. I can tell you on quite a few numbers of times where somebody has told me I can't do something, and I don't know where it comes from, but there's this inner spark that if you tell me I can't do it, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And and it comes across as you're being obstinate, but it's just something that says, don't tell me I can't. And that's a response that I have. I can recall one time playing softball and being the pitcher, and it was a co-ed team, and this gentleman from the other team actually said to me, girls don't belong on the baseball field. And he didn't know that I was the pitcher. And when we got up to play and I got on the pitching mound, he just kind of looked at me like, oh. And I don't know where it came from, but it was a slow pitch game, and I moved my hand like this, and I put a spin on the ball. So every time he was up, I did that spinning pitch, and he would pop the ball up. It would go almost straight up and come to the pitcher, and I would catch it. So he was up 3 times and he was out 3 times. And all I could say at the end, when the losing team was buying pizza for the winning team, I just smiled and I said, what was that you were saying about girls in baseball? It's how you respond to something that gives you that unique spark, because you have a million ways to respond. And how you respond to the action of taking a risk, as Pastor Billy said, staying back here in a cocoon or stepping out. you get to set the ripple effect of what happens beyond you. So in a conversation, for example, which is very local, you're one-on-one with somebody, you can respond positively or negatively, and then that person is going to take that and go to the next conversation. And if you responded positively, they're going to have a spark about them. And if you responded negatively, they might be a little less who they are. So we get to affect change by how we show up in the world. And if we are risk averse, which there's nothing really wrong with, because the idea of being risk averse means that you're thinking about safety or making the calculations that Cameron said that you need to take. You know, there are times you need to be risk averse. Walking across the street is one of them. Getting in a car is one of them. You know, we do a lot of things that are pretty dangerous, but we have to plan ahead and we have to use our head. But then there's risk taking, which allows you to stretch. And stretching is a good thing. You know, anybody that I know who's taken yoga has told me many, many times I need to do more stretching. And, you know, typically I go, oh, I don't want to do that. But if you do it, you find out that you're invigorated after. It doesn't tire you out. It helps you move forward. And so I have to change how I respond so that I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Show me one. So that's where our real control in life is, how we respond to the things that happen around us, to the things that are said to us. And when you say something really positive to me, I'm going to blossom and you're going to see the light shine. And when I let the light shine, my response is going to be different and I'm going to take a little bit more risk. So it seems like it's a real personal kind of outlook on life, on how you manage risk. But the thing that I love about it is, as you said, it gets you out of the comfort zone, Carla. And when you get out of your comfort zone, you allow yourself to grow. And when you allow yourself to grow, you find out who you really are. I mean, there's a question I'm asked regularly and I get stumped. And that is, who are you and what do you do? Well, I end up going straight to what do I do, because I'm comfortable with explaining to people what I do. But it's not so comfortable to say who you are. You know, I can easily tell you I'm Jameson's grandmother and I love it. However, that's not who I am. That's one of the things that I represent in the world. Who I am is this ball of energy, light, and love. And we've learned over time not to let that ball of energy, light, and love to shine too bright, because we've been told things like, who do you think you are? Or it's not your place, or that's not how we do things. Well, I have an answer when somebody says that's not how we do things. My answer is typically, and how's that working for you now? Which then makes them say, oh, well, right now it's not really working. And then they're open to a discussion about some change. Change is one of the things that's constant. And I can't remember the ancient Greek philosopher who said that, but it's a constant. There's always change. We don't want it because it's uncomfortable, and yet we have to be in it because we're moving through it. We're on this space-time continuum that's continually moving and moving forward, and we can choose to move forward with it and take those risks and be alive and be the vibrant being we're meant to be, or we can sit in our bark lounger and kind of watch the world go by. That's our choice. And that goes back to what I said, that the thing we can control is how we respond to something. That's our choice. And simply put, we get to choose. So I'm choosing risk.
I agree, Jeannie, because when we choose risk, that's when we come alive. You know, it's like personal experience. My mom hated when I laugh because I have a real loud laugh, and she'd tell me they could hear me all across the ocean because it's so loud. And, you should quiet down. And for a long time, when I was young, I began calming down. And then as I grew a little older and I was doing some other things, it came back loud and clear. My mom reminded me again, and I would say, but Mom, this is who I am. And I had to break out of my comfort zone in order to tell my mom that. And of course, she's not going to reject me for it. But it was hard for her to accept that, she had a daughter who wasn't dainty and saying, oh, Mom, yeah. But a daughter who would talk back. And it was very new to her because my other siblings were a little different. And they were 9 and 10 years older than me. So it created a new way of life for her. But as I said, as I began to become more myself, and it was taking a risk. And we're always taking risks, whether it be with family or acquaintances. If we don't take that risk, we're kind of left in a zone that is not necessarily who we are. Cameron, you look like you have something to say.
Yes, I'm fascinated by the inputs given by Kurt and Pastor Billy and Jean and you indeed. And I thought that there are two aspects that I'd like to highlight here based on everything I've heard and I'm thinking of. From the lens of leadership. Leadership, as I see it, is everyone's prerogative. Leaders are not born or made. They are born and made. That's how I see it. And trying to say I'm not a leader is abdicating life itself, because we need to lead our lives from that standpoint. And John Maxwell says it very well, that leadership is a verb, it's a set of behaviors, and every human being behaves and behaves in ways that are effective and ineffective. So coming from the leadership lens, what can I do for myself to become a better leader? Well, I mean, I'll take Kurt's cue, which is that if you want to be a good leader, then you need to discover yourself. And self-discovery can only come from new experiences. It's when you do things that you've never done before, it's an unknown territory, you've embarked on it, that's when you discover a new dimension within you. And I feel that cue is a good one for leaders, and they need to attempt in doing that. Those are risks that you have to take. What can you do for others as a leader? I feel that the two words that come to mind here are, because Pastor Billy was also talking about fear. And I feel that encouragement is a word I've heard many times. But what is encouragement? It is helping an individual confront his or her fears. And how do you do that? I feel I've done some research with young people who are in the ages of 18 to 24, and also some entrepreneurs who have done rather well financially and are in a good place. So I asked them, what has someone done for you that meant the most? What has someone done for you that meant the most? And 90% of the time, what I've heard them tell me is, I believe in you. You can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. That is encouragement. And I feel that when you are saying that, you're not lying. You're talking to the best creation of God. The person you're addressing may not be aware of that, but you are. And therefore, you are saying something which is planting a seed of possibility and tapping into that immense potential that the individual was oblivious of, was unaware of. So that is something we can do for others, encourage them by saying simple things with sincerity. I believe in you, you can do it. Just these thoughts came to my mind. And conclusion is this, that Dr. Peter Senge, who is very well known in the domain of learning organizations, and his research spans decades. He talks about Mistakes. Human beings are prone to error. If I'm not making mistakes, I'm not alive. And mistakes, if I'm afraid of making mistakes, I'll do nothing in life. And organizations that do not create a culture where people can express themselves, make mistakes, learn from them, and innovate, those organizations are stunted. They do not grow to the potential that they can. And individuals need to know that if they're making mistakes, it's because they're doing something. And it's only in those mistakes that the wisdom is actually developed and one learns from them. Of course, it's crazy to keep making mistakes and not learn from them. That is stupid. And I'm suggesting that don't ever be afraid of making mistakes. And that's one of the risks you take, because you could be zapped for it. But then don't ever be ashamed of having made a mistake. At least you tried, you did something in life. So these are some thoughts I wanted to amplify. Thank you.
I love your comment about I believe in you. Because if someone hadn't said that to me 4 years ago, I would not be doing what I'm doing now. I say it all the time to the people who come up to me and say, I cannot speak English. I know I say that in a very funny mock way, but I really care about these people. And I said, you said that beautifully. Did you say it in Urdu? And they say, no, depending where they're from. If they're from France, I'll say French. No, I said it in English. And I said, did you say that in Urdu? No, I said it in English. The whole point is it's encouragement from someone to say, hey, you can do it. And if they don't, when they hear those words, that courage begins to come out of them. And that's how I taught when I taught special ed. You know, you can do it. You said you can't read, but you read The Cat in the Hat, and you did it beautifully. Read the next sentence. Oh, wow, you read that too. And that encouragement is what keeps a child or even an adult, even someone 100 years old, goes and continues because someone has said, I believe in you. Kurt, you've been quiet for a while, and that's not like you.
Well, we are on a team that has a propensity for verbosity, but that's another story. And it's a beautiful team. I've been together with a few of you for a number of times, and I love meeting Kamran. I love wise guys, you know. And actually, my first name means wise counselor in Old German, so I can be a wise guy. But it reminded me about this simple thing when kids are young and they're brought to a Chinese restaurant for the first time. And the kids don't want to eat that because it looks so yucky or whatever. And you get them to experiment with that. And the joy on their face when they get to taste that, it's like, same thing within. I loved India because of the food. I mean, not just because of the food, and I brought a whole bunch of scouts to a Bangladeshi place in the 100th anniversary of Boy Scouts to be able to experiment with that. And food is something that brings us together and lets us explore a little bit. And that camaraderie can break down barriers, not only amongst ourselves, but also make us see that we can actually talk about this, or we can experiment with that. We can experiment with anything. And this idea of giving encouragement. I have a list of about 10 or 15 pages of links to special videos or little short 4-minute programs or 12 or whatever that are uplifting. They're all, because I designed it for a happiness class I was working with. And one of them it won the Toastmasters International presentation. And the title of it was, I see something in you, but I don't know what it is. And just this pondering, this cue to seek out that which is within ourselves that is going to bring us the spark in our life, that spark that made me be an educator and not stop. I'm only 75, and who's going to stop me? You ain't. Now, maybe God will stop me in this life, but what's the next life going to be? It's another adventure. Who knows? Nobody's for sure about that. We know that the Bible says this, the Quran says that, and so on and so forth. But for sure, nobody knows. It's all on faith. So if we happen to explore becoming the microbiome of the planet because they buried me, then I feed these plants and animals with this body. Is this body me? Well, that's the good question that somebody already asked. Who am I? I had ventured to stand in front of 400 people when I was asked to be able to say, the highest vision you have of yourself. They're businessmen. And so they're thinking about, I'm a CEO of this company or that. And I said, I am God, and so are you. And I got down off the stage. And it was a chance to be able to open up communication. It was a chance to see what people really believed about life. Whereas they had their blinders on. And I'm one of those guys that doesn't like being in a cocoon. So here I am, and here we are, because we're pretty much the same. The very first time I had to speak was shaking, literally shaking. My hands were sweaty. It was in front of a college class when I had to do a speech about the person I knew best, myself. And yet I knew who I was, I thought, and so on. But how did I change to be able to speak with no problem and to be able to hardly ever shut up or whatever it might be? So exploration, adventure, this is the key to life, I think. And here we are. We get to adventure in this pandemic, and we're learning through doing this Zoom call or this StreamYard call or whichever calls we're on, and we expand our consciousness and stop being in the cocoon of past conditionings. Our society conditions us to think that we can't have peace. Why not? What makes you think so? We got to have war. Oh, they say there's the yin and the yang. Well, the yin and the yang is in a nice Taoist symbol that's complete with including both. So I'm done, and expand our communication. It is like that.
Thank you, Kurt. I really love what you said, because it is true. We're all stuck together, and we're all a part of one universe. And we are not the body. We just think we're the body. We're much bigger than the body, and we have much more to bring to the world. Pastor Billy, because we are, believe it or not, we don't have much longer in this show.
Yeah. I encourage everyone watching, and even all of us, to continue to move forward in taking risks. You know, I mentioned this to my congregation. There is, and you may think I'm a little crazy when I mention this, but that's okay. We're all a little crazy. But there is great joy in taking risk. I mean, I'm sure if we had Dr. King or Mahatma Gandhi on the call today, they would say, yeah, there's hardship in taking risk, but there's also great joy. And I always share with my congregation that that's really how you know you're alive, is when you're taking risk. And I talk about being on the edge of faith. And when we're there on the edge of faith, there's a great scene in a fictional film called Raiders of the Lost Ark. You remember that, when Indiana Jones is seeking the Holy Grail there, and he's got a chasm, and he's being told to step out, and there's nothing beneath him. It's just like an open chasm. But yet he takes the risk and he steps out on that. That's got to be one of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite movies. And he took the risk, and then he actually was walking in midair. So taking risk, it is walking in midair, because you don't know what the future is going to bring. And okay, we have Indiana Jones on the line with us right now. There he is. Okay. So there's great joy in taking risk, and God will be with you. In my context, Jesus Messiah will be with you. So don't be afraid, have no fear, take risk, and Indiana Jones will be with you right there. There he is, Indiana Jones. He'll be with you. Thank you. That's it. Take risk. You'll find real joy being on the cutting edge.
And Indiana Jones, I didn't realize he was Indiana Jones, will be with us again and again, because he is willing to take a risk in a conversation. And that's extremely important. My friend Cameron.
Yes. My concluding remarks, if I may, would be that all of us have a sense of what success means. And my favorite definition in the context of risk is success is how hard you bounce back after a fall. So go for it. As Kurt had mentioned, life is there to be experienced. And I think it was underlined very beautifully by Jean and Pastor Billy as well. And you've been agreeing with them, Carla. So that's my bit. Bounce back every time you fall, and bounce back harder.
Bounce back higher.
Carla, you're muted.
Never be afraid to fall. Because if you're afraid to fall, you're losing out on what life is all about. Fall as many times, because every time you fall, you come out stronger afterwards. We do have more time. We're not ending right this moment. So if you have anything else to say, you're welcome. I just wanted Pastor Billy to speak again before we went off air. Jeannie.
What we've just been talking about reminds me of the idea of muscle memory. When we learned to ride a bike, when we learned to walk, when you watch a baby learn to walk, they fall. But babies are great because they're kind of like little rubbery beings. They fall, they roll, they crawl, they get back up. And nothing will stop them once they get it in their mind that they can move forward standing straight up with 2 feet. They try. They'll hold on to things. They'll climb onto things. There's a lot of determination. And I would love to see each of us have the inner game in the inside of our head, where we can allow ourselves to be that innocent and that determined to take risks. So again, when you're learning to ride a bike, you have training wheels on them, and then mom and dad take the training wheels off, and lo and behold, they let go of the bike and you fall. That falling is part of learning. that we talked about mistake, and metaphysically the word sin means a mistake. And once I heard that, and it didn't matter if it was true or not, once I heard that, it changed my mind to, oh my God, yeah, I'm a sinner because I make mistakes all the time. And that changes a whole lot of things that we were brought up being told. But if you look at things that we cherish from growing up, learning to walk, learning to ride a bike, God help us, learning to drive. I think there's nothing more dangerous than putting a 16-year-old behind a 2-ton 4-wheel monstrosity. And I'm talking about me, nobody else. The first time I drove, I went off the road and got a flat tire. So, it doesn't matter what the circumstances were, I had a mistake. So these mistakes help us grow. That gives us the opportunity to think about risk taking as something in muscle memory. You take a risk, maybe it's a small one. It works out okay. You kind of say, okay, I did it. I'm happy. Then you take another one, it becomes a little easier. And when you've taken enough of the smaller risks, then your comfort zone has changed. Now you're allowing yourself to take small risks. Now let's take a medium risk. Woo, I didn't die. Nothing happened. I might have actually done something good. I wrote a blog post and people are responding to it. I made a statement and people listened. Oh my gosh, somebody's saying, you need to talk to her. You need to talk to him. People are hearing me. I put 3 things together and I have a new device and I'm going to patent it and maybe become a bazillionaire. These are things that become medium risks and bigger risks, but they become easier as we practice taking risks. When it becomes that muscle memory that taking risks is okay. And that I think we got socialized out of us over the years. So, now here I am at this stage of life going, what do I want to be when I grow up? And, I need to take risks. What is that? But the risks that you allow yourself at some stage of life might be smaller than what they should be. Because over time, people have said, you shouldn't do that, or that's not how it's done, and convinced us that we can't take those risks. And that's why I think it's the inner game that we have to practice. We have to make it okay. We have to rip the Band-Aid off from time to time. Boy, I'm mixing up all my metaphors, but that's okay. I can edit later. These are the kinds of things that would be kind of a fun activity that we could put in every day. As you think about your daily goals, add one goal. What's my stretch risk? And practice it. My stretch risk might be going to talk to a neighbor that we haven't talked about because we are on 2 different sides of the political discourse, and yet you're my neighbor. So let's have a conversation about food, something that we can agree on, and start making those changes, because we don't have to have the world in the chaotic space that it is. And as we talked earlier, we don't have to change the world. We change the world by simply being in it. We change the world by being who we are. And I have to believe that, because over time, I feel like my world has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And then we hit this pandemic and my world became very small, literally small. I for quite some time, I went to the grocery store and I went to my doctor's office, and that was it. The only permission I gave myself to be out in the world was to go see my grandbabies, because you can't stop a grandmother from seeing their grandbabies. That kept me grounded, but my world got really small. And then we started this thing called video conferencing, which I used to do all the time with people that I worked with. But now I'm meeting new people. We're having meetings. My Toastmasters group is all on Zoom right now. We've changed. We've taken risks to change how we communicate and how we reach out to others. And it's become comfortable after 18 months for me to say, "Oh, sure, let's meet on Zoom. I'd love to talk to you about something." And where 18 months ago I would be going like, "Do I look okay? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? This didn't happen overnight. It happened over a span of time. And that's why we need to make it muscle memory, to give ourselves permission to take risks and to stretch, to take a risk and to stretch. It's not hard. And then hopefully somebody hears us, somebody sees us, somebody changes. That's their choice. Their choice is to change. It's not my choice. My choice is to show up and be the godlike being that I was meant to be. And I believe we all have a spark of God's divinity, whether it's, God or Allah or what we call that universal mind that brought us here. We have a spark of that. And it's our job to let that spark glow, not to hold it in. That said, we have to go, there's that, I think we called it creative fiction or tension. There we go. Creative tension, where there is a friction for what you want to be and who you think you are. And sometimes you have to let the wannabe beat out the who you are. And that's when we start to take risks and grow. So I fully believe making it muscle memory will help us.
Muscle memory is so important in this taking risks. My God, when our kids were really small, we went to a park that had the highest slide that I've ever seen. And I would let my boy, he's only like 2 or 3 years old or whatever it was, climb up all the way to the top, and I'm down at the bottom ready to catch him. And then I'd run around as soon as he started to slide and catch him down there. And I saw some parents literally climbing up right below the other one, the little child, so that the child wouldn't even fall 1 foot. And that puts the fear into it. Then I read a book called The Continuum Concept. And it's about the Orinoco River in South America, where these indigenous people literally let their little baby crawling on the side of a cliff, 1,000-foot drop, and they'll let him crawl right up there, not say a word. They know that the child is part of nature and knows. Human beings are more insightful and knowledgeable than we give them credit for. It's like this idea of going on the trek across the Kalahari or something like that, where you've never been. And yet you find all the water sources, you find the food, there's no fear, you're just tuned in with Mother Nature. But how does our society, our education system do with that? It doesn't. You have to know this, have to know that, feed it back to me. Be safe. Oh, you had a boo-boo? Okay, that's cool. Let's do something about it. If you have a boo-boo, you get to be able to be helped. But you don't need to cry, just let's fix it. Thank you.
And actually, because the school system has everything so tight, I left because I could not encourage the kids to be who they are. I had to encourage them to be what everyone wanted to expect them to be. And now I can encourage people to be who they are. And now we are at the end of the hour. It's amazing. And this has been a very deep and wonderful conversation. I want to thank all of my friends who came to speak with me, Jeannie, Kurt, Cameron, and William. It's just been absolutely amazing. If you want to say maybe a last 3 words, just let me know, and then I will close the show.
Yes, I'll say 2 words. Take risks. Take risks. That's it. Signing off.
You, Cameron.
1 word, ditto.
Ah, love it. Kurt,
Come
one
on, you beat
word.
me on that one.
Make it 3.
Well, I would say
That's why we
be,
call Conrad the genius.
be here now, because here we are present. You are present wherever you are, and you can explore that presence. It was a great book that I read many years ago in the early 70s, and it changed my life. It's the most psychosomatically spiritual practice that you can do is reading that book. It's the most educationally sound book I've ever read, and you almost feel it. And to read it, you have to actually experience it. It's a very interesting book. Sorry for more words.
Yeah, but you were to the point. You are usually anyway. Jeannie?
Give yourself permission.
I love that.
Beautiful.
Because when we give permission to ourselves, then we become who we are. And with that, we will be back on Tuesday for another MindPlore. I want to thank everyone for watching and everyone for talking. And we're going to wave goodbye now. Can everyone do a wave?
I'm giving you a clap instead of a wave.
Okay.
This is
and with that,
in sign language.
We are going off air, and Jeannie, stay a moment.